Better late than never, am I right? Swoop pals were a line of plates that were shaped and made to look like cartoony animals. These came in many different designs that all featured an animal face, and were of course made for young kids. That way it made the experience of eating a lot more fun and appealing for them, and also made it easier for the parents. Swoop pals became popular around the late 90s and early 2000s, so kids back then who grew up in those times might have remembered them and considered them nostalgic. Back in those times, a wild craze of weird and freaky food products was in the rise, so it isn't a surprise to see such a cool and fun product like this being made during this time. Unfortunately, due to lack of demand, Hefty, the company that made these plates, had to discontinue the product, and since then, Swoop pals has been nothing but a memory. There's cheap versions of the product that you can buy online, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be the same. And we're all grown up now, so yeah. Mr. Men is a series of books made by English author Roger Hargreaves. They were books targeted for infants that saw many simple characters that had a single quality that characterized them. There was Mr. Happy, Mr. Messy, Mr. Noisy, and many more. They were simple storytelling books that were used by parents to tell their kid a bedtime story, so you can imagine how these books became nostalgic to kids in the 2000s. They could also be found in schools and libraries during the time. Nowadays, the Mr. Men book series is still active, but not as much as before, but in places like the UK, it is still a widely popular book series. Lemfa was an electronic dance music duo that became hugely popular during the late 2000s and early 2010s. The group was composed of Uncle Redfoo and Nephew Skyblue. These two were the masterminds behind some of the most popular songs of our times, like the party rock anthem, I'm Sexy and I Know It, and Sorry for Party Rocking. Young kids back in the day remember listening and hearing these songs everywhere they went. They would play them on the radio, kid television channels, and even at school. One particular occurrence being when the teachers organized a school party, or even when the PE teacher would play music for the students to vibe with while exercising or jogging. It was the perfect music to have a good time to. The pair eventually split up due to differences in 2012, but we can all agree that the duo was a hit during their time, and we all remember their songs for one reason or another. They, without a doubt, took the world by surprise. During YouTube's early days, back when the platform was more small and barely taking off, videos that were able to generate over 1 million views were pretty much seen as the top of the top, and would be considered staples in the YouTube community. These videos were usually a singular thing, but there was a user back in the day who pretty much was able to pull this off repeatedly and helped raise YouTube and also establish the idea of constant uploads and a format of video that is now used by lots of people in the platform, and that was Ray William Johnson. Ray William Johnson is a content creator who was pretty successful back in the late 2000s. He was among the few people to be considered a YouTube star or online celebrity at the time. This was because of a show that he made up and put up on his YouTube channel that went by the name of Equals 3. His web series saw him reacting to lots of viral videos and internet culture in general, with a side of his witty personality and comical jokes here and there. At the time, the idea of having a show with constant episodes being put up in a platform like YouTube was fairly new, and it of course attracted a huge following for Ray, lending him millions and millions of views for so many years. As stated with some earlier things on the Iceberg, if you were on YouTube at the time, then you'd for sure encounter a video or two of this creator. He's definitely one of the OGs of the platform, and he still makes videos till this day. But he did eventually stop making Equals 3 a while ago, and has since then focused on more personal content and has even collaborated on other media and also pursued making films and acting. It is because of creators like him that YouTube became what it is today. Lisa Frank is a brand of whimsical and surreal school supplies and miscellaneous products. It was made by the person of the same name, and the products that they make put rise to an aesthetic that keeps on being relevant and attracting to young kids and adults alike. 90s and early 2000 kids remember the product well due to how big of a presence they had in classrooms, and just overall how the aesthetic could be recognized thanks to its vibrant colors and prominent pink. Lots of kids, especially girls, liked and had some of these products in the early to late 2000s. And like I mentioned, such products expanded from just being school supplies to quickly turning into their own aesthetic. Stickers, phone cases, and even clothes were made from the brand that ultimately established the brand as something more than just colorful gibberish. It was a style and a buy for some. Empire today is a home furnishing company that specializes in carpet and flooring. It was founded in 1959 by Seymour Cohen and is one of the most popular furnishing companies out there, spanning over more than 75 metropolitan areas in the US. So you might be thinking, why is this company nostalgic? Well, just watch this.
800-588-2300 Empire.
Today.
Most, if not all of their commercials had this jingle on them and the phone to call them if you needed some carpet installation in your home. It didn't matter if you were watching cartoons or watching Family Feud on TV. You would occasionally have this commercial appear, and not just once, but every commercial break you would see it being shoved into your face. And because of that, we all remember that characteristic jingle and that old man that made the commercial fun and rememberable. One quick detail though, this commercial and its format has been going on for quite a while, ever since the 60s, but we all probably remember the commercials from the early and late 2000s going forward. So yeah, if you need some carpet installation, then you know who to call. The Black Eyed Peas is another one of those musical groups that became hugely popular in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Their most popular songs include Pump It, I Got a Feeling, and The Time. Their songs were heard everywhere as previously mentioned with the musical duo Lamphal, and they both share the common theme that these songs were played in lots of schools and used frequently in movies, shows, cartoons, and popular culture in general. They were the main songs to play at a party, and a must for school parties in the late 2000s. The Black Eyed Peas though are still around and making music, but their popularity hasn't been the same since they started to take many indefinite hiatuses and also have members of the band leave to pursue different goals. Schoolhouse Rock is an animated musical and educational series that was aired on the children's programming block on ABC. It was made by David McCall and published by Disney. Lots of kids remember watching this show on a Saturday morning or whenever they woke up to go to school. It is one of those shows that was made for the specific reason to teach children new concepts that range from math to history and civics, all with tunes that were made to be catchy and also fun, which is why they became nostalgic. Even nowadays, people who watch this show still remember it fondly, and some even go as far as to buy DVDs so that their kids can go ahead and watch them. The show also became available to stream on Disney Plus not too long ago. I personally never heard about this series, but I can see why people are nostalgic to it. The iDog was a robot dog toy that was first designed and manufactured by Sega Toys, and it was an iPod accessory that you would plug in into your iPod and it would act as both a speaker and a pet. The iDog worked by reacting and communicating with the user with its LED lights, and it had different color modes that showed how it was feeling. It would also dance to the music you were playing, of course. It was almost like if you had a Tamagotchi with speaker capabilities. These iDogs became really popular during the iPod era, and Sega wouldn't be the only company to make their own. Sooner than later, Hasbro decided to jump into the craze and they started to make their own iDogs, and after that, the iDog became a product so popular that it even got its own bootlegs and non-official versions that came in many different colors and shapes. There was even an iCat and an iFish. All in all, the iDog was a fun product that if you were ever able to have, then you must have had a fun and cool childhood. Seeing one of these at a young age was like seeing the peak of technology. I mean, a robot dog that can play music and be my pet? Heck yeah, I want one. Pop Tropica is an online role-playing game that was made in 2007. And like with the many MMO games that we discussed in the list, it was created with the Flash engine and it was made to appeal to younger audiences. The game was developed by Pearson Education, but was created by Jeff Keeney, author of the popular book series Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which in itself could be another spot in the Iceberg. The game was all about exploring islands and getting to play a role in all of the quests that you found. You could win medals and use them to trade for accessories and apparel, which you could use to customize your character. The game also provided a way to chat with other players through a pre-scripted chat system, which could be seen as a good or bad choice from the developers, but it was put into use to make the virtual world safe for children. Kids in schools during the late 2000s and the early 2010s that were only confined to play cool math games in their school computers also played this game, which, to be fair, was one of the better choices and also a game that kids would go on and play even when they were on school playgrounds. It was Club Penguin level of good. Well, almost there, but it was in fact one of the most popular choices. Nowadays, the game is still surprisingly active and it still garners a following, even after all of these years. Super Mario Logan, or now more well known as SML, is a YouTube channel that makes video skits with Mario plushies and other original characters. The skits all follow the adventures of Mario, Luigi, and other characters like Jeffy, Chet Pee-Pee, and Black Yoshi. The channel became really popular during the early 2010s, thanks to the outlandish humor that was used and also because of the fact that they used plushies and Nintendo paraphernalia overall, bringing lots of fans to the channel, especially younger kids who were attracted to the plushies and the Nintendo characters. For a whole decade, the channel has been hugely popular within YouTube and has been getting millions of views non-stop. A lot of us grew up watching these kids and remember the channel for being fun, quirky, and entertaining. Lately though, there has been an unfortunate change with the channel because of some legal troubles between SML creator and Nintendo. Let's just say that Nintendo didn't like the fact that SML was using their characters in a way that didn't represent them. So they filed a cease or desist letter to the SML crew, which then prompted them to stop making videos with Nintendo characters, downright changing their whole appeal and causing them to ultimately end the channel and delete it soon. They'll still be making videos in their new channel, but the nostalgia will always be there. VAT19 is a company that specializes in making and selling weird and interesting products. It was first founded in the 2000s by Jamie Salvatore, and its aim is to promote the weirdest and most curious products. One of the ways the company became known was through its YouTube videos that acted as commercials for their products. Back in the 2010s, their videos were some of the most watched in the platform, and they would garner over millions of views each one, due to their funny humor and creative commercials. Their style as a company is something that you don't often see in companies anymore. They're wild and don't try to act professional, which to me I think is the appeal. Just a great and fun company with some good and awesome products. Mugen is a free 2D fighting game engine that was released in 1999 by Alekbyte. It was developed using the C programming language and it was made to enable you to basically create your own fighting game. You can customize pretty much everything in it, from the interface to the characters, the stages, and the feel of the game. The reason Mugen is nostalgic though, is because of its popularity on the internet and the fact that people will go ahead and make versions of Mugen that feature lots of popular characters, or original stories in our fighting games. But some users went far ahead and made totally ridiculous but funny packs that combine characters that you otherwise would never see in a fighting game. Videos of Mugen could be found all over the internet showcasing these character packs and having the funniest and craziest of fights, and people remember seeing them every once in a while when YouTube would recommend them to you. Or some even remember playing Mugen and downloading packs of characters to pretty much just see what could happen if you were to put Ronald McDonald against Colonel Sanders. The potential of Mugen is limitless, and it is no surprise that even after more than 22 years, it still is an engine that keeps on being relevant, having lots of fans and active users still making things for it. It is the ultimate fighting game mod crossover. The Twinkies crisis was a time when Twinkies, the popular brand of small cakes, became discontinued. The company Hostess that produces these cakes announced around 2012 that they would file for bankruptcy, and that by the end of 2012 their snacks would become discontinued. And when it happened, Twinkies were becoming less and less common all around the market and local stores. This prompted a Twinkie drought and made for some good old panic buying. People began to buy all of the Twinkie boxes that they found in an effort to scavenge and further store Twinkies so that they could sell them at a higher price, and maybe they just wanted them for themselves or as a reminder. This was all going to become a useless effort because by the beginning of 2013, two companies by the name of Metropolis and Apollo Global Management purchased the Hostess brand and returned the snacks back to the stores as normal. If you lived in the US, then this was quite apparent to you. Some people were making a huge deal about it in social media, and news were talking about it as well at the time. It just goes to show just how influential and good some small cakes can be. Habbo Hotel is another online multiplayer game that was made for browsers. In this game, players are able to socialize with other players in a virtual world with many spaces, customize their character, and earn in-game money with which they can decorate their home or buy clothes and accessories. The game was first released in the 2000s, and since then it has grown to become a big online community, similar to that of online spaces like Second Life. Habbo, though, was more oriented for teenagers and young adults, so it's definitely more mature than other online browser games at the time that we've already discussed. In fact, Habbo was so open and unsupervised that it quickly became a different game in its own when users started to make their own rules inside the game. Lots of controversies started to arise, and the game became a sort of a job simulator. But that's a different topic in its own. The presence that it had around the late 2000s was enormous, and if you were ever playing Flash games at the time, then I bet you do remember seeing this game appear. Habbo Hotel is one of those early browser games that if you were ever in the internet for long, you at least encountered. Be it because of the controversy surrounding the game, the ads, or simply because you used to be an active player. Zany Brainy was a retail store that sold toys and multimedia products for children. It was founded in 1991 by Phil Schwartz, and its aim was to bring a new experience for kids when they came to a store to buy some toys or simply to explore. The difference that this store had when compared to others already mentioned like Toys R Us was that Zany Brainy was all about interactivity. The store was filled with interactive toys and other things like interactive screens and video games that you could play, making coming to these stores a fun time for young kids. By 2001 though, Zany Brainy decided to file for bankruptcy because of financial difficulties and their stores were closed the year after, sharing the same fate as other toy companies. One interesting detail though is that the store was revived as an online store in 2020, which is kind of funny considering that their main appeal was the idea of being in the store and interacting with the toys. But yeah, that's that. VTech is a company that specializes in making tech toys for young children in order to better familiarize them with the technology of the time, and also for educational purposes. They also make cordless phones, but that's a different topic. It was founded in 1976 in Hong Kong, where they started making really basic machines that play Pong and make calculations. Around the 2000s though, VTech started to make toy laptops that for some reason became highly popular among young children. They were attracting due to their design, but really the software that was in it was pretty outdated and old. But even though the laptops had such software, lots of kids had these and liked using them. The laptops had educational games that were there to entertain children and also for them to learn things like numbers and the alphabet. And with the years passing, VTech has been getting more and more sophisticated with their devices. But if you were a kid in the 2000s, then you can remember seeing these interesting toys. If you were an avid PBS Kids viewer when you were a kid, then Sabumafu is a show that you must remember watching. It was a show that lasted through the late 90s and early 2000s that saw both Martin and Chris Pratt, two brothers with a love for nature and a lemur by the name of Sabumafu, care for animals and teach children about nature. This show is remembered by lots of people because of how unique it was at the time. The production for this show was incredible, and it had things like animation, puppeteering, special effects, and actual animals on the show. Even when the show was taken off air from PBS Kids, the show continued to be popular, and it began playing on other channels, and they even had DVDs and VHS tapes made of the show. It was a fun and educational show that really stuck into kids' minds. I still remember it myself even after all of these years. For some reason, waterbeds are part of the Iceberg, and I could kind of relate to this. Waterbeds at the time were a huge trend, and everyone's parents had one, or your friend's parents. They were quite curious to be honest, and everyone always made a huge deal about them and always pointed out the fact that they had one. Whether you had one or not, There was just something about them that made them feel special. It was an interesting idea at the time, but when you found yourself filling the bed for hours, then that really took the interesting out of it. I never got to sleep on one, but I do remember being curious and also anxious whenever I thought of one. Mainly because I remembered hearing stories of people drowning on them, or seeing that Freddy Krueger movie where one of the characters gets trapped in by one of those waterbeds. That must have been a huge factor as to why waterbeds became a fear for a lot of kids at the time. But yeah, waterbeds used to be the main thing to have, but judging by the fact that traditional beds are still winning by majority, that I can safely say that it is a thing of the past, a memory for a lot of us. Mr. Six is the mascot for the popular entertainment corporation Six Flags. The mascot was featured in many commercials and advertisements or aired on TV and many other mediums. Mr. Six appears as an elderly man wearing a tuxedo with big frame glasses who more often than not is shown performing a funny dance right after getting out of a bus with the song "We Like to Party" in the background. Mr. Six was quite successful as a mascot for Six Flags. It even got to a point that they started to really push it with big campaigns featuring the character and making advertisement stunts like featuring the old man in shows like Good Morning America and even making contests that center around the old man. Through 2004 to 2010, he was the main man to step up into the dance floor, and everyone who watched TV at the time knew that. By the end of the 2010s, the old man was retired though, so no more commercials and our stunts, but he is still part of the brand, and he appears in a lot of the merchandise. Chicka Chicka Boom Boom is a children's educational book made by Bill Martin Jr. and John Archambault. The book features anthropomorphized versions of the alphabet and shows them speaking to one another as they climb onto a coconut tree. This book was of course meant to be educational for young children, teaching them the alphabet while being upbeat and fun. There was also a video version of this book that was released and produced by Scholastic in the late 90s that featured a song with a very soul-like flavor, which could also be considered nostalgic by those who watched it. It is a book and song that was used a lot throughout those years by parents and even kindergarten teachers, and it quickly became a memory for some. Mike Mozart is a content creator that made toy reviews and toy showcases. He started to make videos during the early years of YouTube, and his videos were seen by a lot of kids at the time that were interested in seeing toy products. Mike had a really fun and cheery personality that I think benefited his videos a lot. He had two channels, one that was started in 2007, Jeppers Media, that featured weird and failed toys, and another one that was started 2 years after that was more about toys in general and was less about showing the failed stuff. He was pretty consistent for a lot of years, until recently around the mid-2010s that he stopped and made videos here and there. Nowadays he is still uploading from time to time, but just to show his life or make a live stream and talk to his biggest fans. It seems as though he is still having a good life and doing what he likes, which is great to see. Hungry Pumpkin is a flash game that became popular around the 2000s. This is an estimate, by the way. I couldn't find more info about the origin of this game. Only thing that I could find about its origin was that the game appeared in a website that hosted many other games of the same caliber. But yeah, you would think that a game like this would be made for educational purposes and for young kids to play and learn while doing so. And it is. But the reason why it is popular is because it is a very funny and half-baked game. The game is all about you fitting this pumpkin with all the foods that are on the counter. Simple enough. But then you see the pumpkin, and let's just say that the way it was drawn, it made it be quite memorable. And the pumpkin also spoke to you with a very funny and interesting voice that also gave it its charm.
Give me the chicken.
It was a weird game, but the internet catapulted and made it known through YouTube videos and parodies that they would make using this game. Overall, it is just a curious game that due to its weird design choices, it became almost a meme around the community. Back in the 2000s, logos were very common. They would appear during the beginning or at the end of a show or movie. That way, the corporation would be credited with supporting or making such movie or show. They were all around the multimedia spectrum, and there were some cool logos that we all remembered, like the Disney ones and the Pixar logo. But in the midst of all those logos, There was a bunch of them that, because of their design choices and their animation, they quickly went from being simple animations to being nightmare fuel. Some examples include most of the Viacom logos, that weird abomination that appeared in the classic Super logo in the Nickelodeon DVDs, the infamous S from Hell, which has scared lots of people and is one of the most scary logos for some reason, and who couldn't forget the main one that we all remember seeing, the THX logo. Sorry for scaring you there, but anyway, you might be thinking, why would logos like this be scary? Well, at the time, they were when you were a kid, but now that we are all probably grown up, you see this and you don't feel a thing because it no longer is unknown or mysterious to you. You know it is a logo for a company, but back then when we didn't know that, it could cause a lot of us to be at the very least uncomfortable. That's scary logos to you. Local 58 is a web series that was created by Chris Stroth, who is known for creating the popular creepypasta Candle Cove. The web series follows the broadcast of a TV station by the name of Local 58 that is presumed to be lost footage that spans all around from the 1970s to the 2010s. These broadcasts are eerie and definitely uncomfortable to watch as they incorporate things like subliminal messages, creepy audio, and a lot of TV-like effects that make for a very surreal feeling. Local 58 began its way on the internet back in 2015 with a website that hosted these broadcasts, but then the videos were uploaded to YouTube in an official channel, when the website was taken out by its creator. After this, Local 58 began to become more known and it eventually gained a cult following that enjoyed the idea of the videos and the format so much that the videos themselves spanned a new format by the name of Analog Terror, inspiring other content creators to make horror of this type. I can definitely imagine the idea of two friends watching scary things together and finding out about these videos. I remember doing that myself at the time with some of my friends. Very late Gen Z nostalgia, but nostalgia nonetheless. Baby Einstein is a production company that makes all kinds of products, most notably direct-to-video films that specialize in being interactive and educational for young children. The company was founded in 1996, and in 2001 it was actually sold to Disney, and for a while they made a series of the same name that has tons of episodes. As with other kids shows at the time like Sesame Street, Baby Einstein was played and seen by a lot of kids in the 2000s, and parents of course bought these educational films for their children to learn, or at least that's what they thought. Because in 2010, a study was published in Psychological Science that proved that the show didn't improve children's understanding of words, and that the show did more harm than good. Not just this study, but lots of studies made during the 2000s were proving the same thing. They were all trying to bring Baby Einstein down, and they sort of did, because after 2013, Disney decided to leave it at that, and shortly after it sold the company to Kids 2 Inc. But even if the studies proved that, Baby Einstein has really proven to be part of a lot of kids' childhoods. Kony 2012 was a movement that became popular around 2012 on the internet after Jason Russell, a filmmaker from the campaign group Invisible Children, made a 30-minute documentary titled Kony 2012 that ultimately called Joseph Kony, the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army from Uganda, out on his crimes. The film exposed Joseph Kony's crimes, which range from having a militia made out of abducted children, committed murder, and also having sex workers. All of this came to a shock for a lot of people, especially people on the West who didn't know about the issue, so it quickly gained traction and the topic Kony 2012 became viral on the internet. The original 30-minute documentary got so much attention that it became YouTube's first video to reach 1 million likes. And like it is on the internet, people started to make memes of the situation. Some did it to bring some lighting to the issue, while others did it for the laughs. At the time, it was fairly new to see such a viral trend like that happening all around social media, and even more so since it was about an actual issue. Even though Joseph Kony never got captured, and Jason Russell had received criticisms about his campaign and the film that started it all, people still remember that surge of attention and how it shook the internet by surprise. This entry in the Iceberg refers to a type of video genre that originated on a Japanese website called Nico Nico Doga. This genre of videos consisted of sampling or getting footage from any video or audio source, most often going for anime or video game sources, and then using the footage to complement an already existing melody or song. This genre of video became known as MAD, or Automad in Japan. As the videos expanded in reach and started to become popular during the late 2000s, soon enough they found their way into YouTube, and lots of people jumped into the wagon, making their own Automads. These got so popular in the West that some ended up comparing them to YouTube poops, but in a more musical form, which is why some call them YTPMVs, which stands for YouTube Poop Musical Video. Most popular sources used for these videos included Ronald McDonald, Jack Black, and various anime characters. YTPMVs or Automads are amazing, and truly an example of what some good editing and sampling can do. To be honest, I remember watching these videos when I was young and being truly inspired to be able to edit like that. One of the few inspirations that made me want to learn video editing. But yeah, even today, YTPMVs or Automads are still being made, and there's still a huge community of people that keep on making visual masterpieces and show us the true limits of video editing. Betty Spaghetti was a brand of dolls made by the Ohio Art Company. These dolls were unique because of their ability to interchange parts, almost like a Lego figure. You could switch the head, the arms, the body, and most notably the hair that you could style in many different ways. This made it so that you could have a very unique doll because of the many pieces that you could either trade with someone or buy off of the store. Young girls were very attracted to these dolls because of that, so they became rather successful and the kids in the 2000s remember them. One funny thing though is that lots of people remember the way the hair tasted. It was like a collective memory for a lot of people who had these, almost like how everybody knows how Play-Doh tastes like. There were also commercials as well that showcased these interesting dolls. But yeah, it was an inventive and creative idea at the time that had its moment of popularity and their deserved spot in the memories of some. Maripets is an online virtual pet game website that was released in 2004. The game was about playing minigames and doing quests that would give you in-game currency to then get pets which you could trade and or own. And if you thought that the name Maripets was similar to another game, and even the mechanics, then you're definitely correct. Fun fact, the person who created this game was a Neopets player at the time, who had a guild that was shortly then deleted, and he, as a way to take action on his own hands, decided to make a world, similar to that of Neopets, but instead with his own vision, and thus, Maripets was born. Maripets had some really good popularity during the 2000s, and lots of kids compared both Neopets and Maripets, most usually signaling Maripets as an utter rip-off, but both games had their differences and were enjoyed by kids at the time. Maripets though has had its own fair share of controversies which has really given the game a very negative look. Add also the fact that, as the years went by, the game became more adult oriented, and the kids who grew up playing it ended up feeling disconnected altogether. It is a game that unfortunately has had a very rough team supporting it throughout the years, but even though it has been rough, it definitely got to have a cult following. Long before we had videos like these on YouTube, there existed things like scary mazes and alien sighting videos that back in the day when we were kids were the scariest things that you could find on the platform. And from all that, there was these videos that circled around 12 years ago. Evil Elmo and Evil Barney. These videos were made purposely to scare off children, of course, but it's rather funny to watch them now. The videos all feature edits of Barney and Elmo with evil-like faces and are blood or questionable things, while in the background, a song or an audio of someone imitating the character plays. Most of them feature dark humor, and they're not that scary. They're just really badly made videos to scare off people, mainly children. Although, from what I'm gathering, it did end up scaring a bunch of people in their childhood. Spitting Image is a British satirical television show that was created by Peter Fluck and was originally aired in 1984. This show depicts recreations of very prominent people in history and in the present time, and puts them in a sitcom-like series. The show tries to parody famous people and sort of mock their persona by exaggerating certain funny or even bad traits that they might exhibit publicly. Most kids remember this show not because of its humor or the plot, but mainly because of the puppets that were made for the show. The way famous people were portrayed in this show is rather grotesque, but it of course was done due to the nature of the show. But kids weren't too happy to see them. Most remember being uncomfortable or even being scared by the puppets, and to be honest, I can totally understand. Even right now, seeing them is rather eye-soaring, and I can imagine how a kid would feel seeing this show. Davy and Goliath was a children's television show that was all about the adventures of a kid and his talking dog, and how these two learned valuable morals and lessons that connected with religion and faith. This show was geared and made for Christian children. It was one of the few cartoons that really was shown and used in churches for kids to watch. They were educational and of course explicitly made to teach children about religion. Even though this show is old, that didn't stop it from being popular in the 2000s and remembered by kids whose parents brought them to Sunday school, or they watched Christian cartoons on TV. Some people remember it being like a toned down version of Calvin and Hobbes, which sounds kinda neat. The internet during the 2000s and early 2010s was a whole different place than what it is now. And when you look at the videos that were made during the time on YouTube, it becomes apparent. The editing programs at the time weren't that sophisticated or high-tech per se. Windows Movie Maker was one of those programs that probably came with your computer, and lots of people used it. If you were a kid at the time interested in video making, or even things like stop-motion videos, then I can 100% bet that you use Windows Movie Maker, or at least have heard of it. Back in the day, the filters and effects that this program had were seen as good and high quality, but they didn't age well. Yet, they still carried that nostalgic feeling of the old era of video making. On the other hand, there was also iMovie home videos that appeared years later. This editing program in particular was really interesting because it would let you use templates that the app already came with, like action movie trailers and intros. These were especially cool, but as the years went on, we'll all come to really see them as lazy or poor editing or to simply recognize the templates. But to a kid at the time, they were like magic. But yeah, no matter which editing program you used, they were both really good and fun during the time, and they were great stepping stones for those of us who started young in video making. Noodle Cadoodle was an American store that sold toys that were mostly educational and meant to be fun and entertaining for children. Their stores were remembered by lots of kids because of how interactive they were. You could step into the store and have a lot of fun, even if you weren't gonna buy anything. The retail chain was founded in 1993, and for about 7 years they were the best toy store to go to for many kids. At the time, there was also Sandy Brainy, which we've already talked about. These two were huge rivals, and they were both really similar in style and motto, which made it an even more intense competition. But eventually during the 2000s, Noodle Cadoodle was bought by Sandy Brainy themselves and turned into one of them, marking their fate. It was a fast and rather spontaneous move that ended up putting Noodle Cadoodle away and making it a memory. But to put it simply, they were an alternative for Sandy Brainy, and probably their biggest competitor at the time. As mentioned previously with the Evil Barney and Elmo videos, there is also a lot of creepy media that feature other characters as well, and one of the most notable ones was Ronald McDonald. This character had a huge amount of videos that try to scare off people with theories and or myths about the character, like how one McDonald's had a statue of the character that moved at night and employees recorded the whole ordeal, or also other more exaggerated ones that said that the clown itself ate children, which is of course fake. But along all of those things, there were some pretty disturbing and rather popular videos that popped up during the 2010s that saw Ronald McDonald as a psychopath and serial killer. These videos were made by YouTube user Raka Raka and were meant to be funny and shocking. They featured very dark humor and a lot of gore, and as you can imagine, for a kid seeing this it would be rather creepy or even scary given what I mentioned. It was of course content that wasn't directed to young kids, but YouTube's algorithm at the time made it known and made it come across to such audiences, which is why a lot of people remember watching such videos when they were young. Leoken Video is a YouTube channel that focuses on toy collections and toy reviews. The channel was one of the first to really get the toy genre going on YouTube during the 2010s, and also one of the few to really have an interesting style to it. You see, this channel didn't just make toy reviews, but they also uploaded lots of videos that focused in spiders for some reason. The owner of the channel, Leo Henry, lives in Australia, and he and his kids used to upload spider videos that during the time became hugely popular on YouTube, garnering millions of views. His channel was for a long time quite successful on the platform, but as time went on and YouTube started to comply with children's laws, the channel was negatively impacted and thus couldn't continue to make the content that they wanted to provide. But in its prime time, the channel did bring a lot of entertainment to kids in the 2010s and lots of viral videos like the Spider Loves Daddy series, one of the few channels that really pioneered in the toy review department. I'm not gonna explain much about this one, but if you were on the internet during the late 2000s and 2010s, then this video title should ring bells. It was one of the most popular shock videos at the time, and everyone knew about it. YouTube was plagued with videos of individuals reacting to it, and it became almost like a dare for people to watch it. If you've never heard of this video or seen the video, then I'd recommend that you don't watch it. It is disgusting. But to tell you the premise, it's basically two girls being lovey-dovey to one another. But at one point in the video, they proceed to eat chocolate from a cup. And no, I don't mean like a drink or ice cream. I'm using the word chocolate loosely here. So you can probably guess what I mean by that. But yeah, this video is not pleasant. And it's right there along with the other shock content on the web for me. Smile Butterfly is a song that was quite popular during the 2000s. The song was made by the Sweden group Smile DK. It wasn't per se a famous song in the musical rankings, but it did appear in a lot of media. Most people who were kids at the time remember hearing it in that one toy cell phone that everyone used to have. Or for those who played rhythm games at the time, we remember playing or hearing the song while going through the DDR song list. Or if you used the internet at the time, remember listening to it in those old yet nostalgic AMVs that people made along with some other popular AMV songs. It's a song that a lot of us have heard, but probably didn't know the name for. It was obscure, but still at the time a nostalgic memory for a bunch of us who grew up with the internet and technology. Elementary school is without a doubt one of the most important time cycles that a kid goes through during their childhood. It's a time when you really get to start socializing and you get to meet friends that could be with you forever. Or not. When remembering elementary school, I'm pretty sure that most of us can recall some small memories or moments that are rather blurred or skewed because of how much time has passed since then. But if you remember well, you start to remind yourself about the people and friends that you had when you attended such school. Friends that you won't probably ever see again. And you start asking yourself how are they, or where they could be, or if you have done something to stay in contact with them. It's rather puzzling to think that the people who have been good friends of yours at an early age are otherwise gone, either because they moved or because you all finished school and ended up going into different places. They are now simply just memories in your head, live nostalgia from the past. We all remember the usual phrase stranger danger. It was the idea that strangers could potentially be dangerous to children, and that if they were to come across one, that they should go ahead and reject the interaction and go to their parents or other responsible adult for aid. It was commonly told by adults in the 2000s to their children as a way to protect them from strangers, and it does have its reason of being. Kids from this generation though, do remember finding helpful adults that ended up being kind to them and helping them come out of some problematic situations. One particular scenario that most of us are probably familiar with is when you'd be lost at a huge retail store trying to find your parents, which then prompted a stranger to approach you and ask you if you were okay and help you find your parents. These memories are minimal, but a lot of people do end up having these long-term memories of them, which is kind of interesting to think about. As kids, we all have gone to the park at least once in our childhood. It was a place to have fun and really to get out and get some air. Parents might have brought you to parks to do just that, and you might remember meeting kids at the park which you probably became friends with and play for a while when you were there. They were your best friend for the moment. You two knew everything about one another, but after being there for an hour or two, either you or them would have to leave the park and never see each other again. It's similar to what we already mentioned with your friends from elementary school, but in a much more singular way. Probably one of the most hidden memories for a lot of us, but if you remember, you remember. Fake nostalgia is a feeling that you might have encountered. It refers to the times when you as an individual have longed for or reminisced an era that you never grew up on, and that you only experience either through movies, shows, and most notably music. Young people from this generation are especially keen on this one, given that we as a generation experienced a boom in communication and technology, which gave us the internet, and through that, we've been able to experience media that has given us the opportunity to enjoy and long for a reality that came long before us. One big example for this is vaporwave or Eddy City Pop music. This genre of music became popular in YouTube around the mid-2010s, and with it, it came the initial spark of fake nostalgia that trapped lots of young audiences. Something about the music, its sounds, and the aesthetic that it portrayed gave a sense of familiarity to a bunch of us, even though most of us have never lived such era. It's rather interesting to think that a bunch of people who were born during the 2000s longed for a generation that they didn't even get to be a part of. But I guess it's just something that happens with each current generation. Liminal spaces are something that became a sort of trend on the internet in 2020. They're images that show interiors or other structures like houses or spaces that have a feeling of being out of place or frozen in time. Some people get this feeling because in all of these images, it seems like there's something missing, or because the picture has a strange feeling of familiarity. This last thing though is the reason as to why these images feel nostalgic to a lot of us who grew up in the 2000s. Most of the images featured places that we've encountered in our lives, like malls, long hallways, or even rooms that could look like your own home. And that in itself paints a very nostalgic picture, but at the same time it makes it feel uncanny. It's like the perfect balance between creepy and nostalgic, which for a bunch of people is rather cool. I gotta say, they do make you feel a certain way, as if you were in a different dimension that is very alike to your own. Damn. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is the end of the Iceberg. It's finished. Part 2 is here. You just watched it, but yeah. I finished it. It took me like, what, 1 or 2 months to finish this? But it's here, like I said. I put a lot of effort into this. It's what I like to think. But yeah, thank you guys. And if you guys like this video, then give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more. And I'll be sure to keep on making videos for you guys. It's what I love to do. So yeah. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'll be making videos much faster than before because now I'm finished with this. So yeah. Thank you guys. Love you all, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So see ya.